I knew something was off the second I saw his shadow cross the frosted glass of my cubicle wall. It was barely 11 a.m., and my manager, Tom, had that hurried, clipped walk he only used when he was about to swing his weight around. He didn't bother with good mornings or small talk. Instead, he stopped at the edge of my desk and said, flat and cold, "Shut down your workstation and leave." No explanation, no context, just an order. Now, in a normal office, that might mean grab your bag, take an early lunch, maybe we're having an impromptu fire drill. But this wasn't a normal office, and Tom wasn't the type to do favors. My desk wasn't just a desk. It was the only terminal directly linked to our biggest client's live feed. A high-security connection that streamed real-time product data, monitored inventory, and coordinated distribution for a launch that had been in the works for months. I didn't say anything right away. Just looked up at him. His jaw was tight, like he was daring me to challenge him. "You heard me?" he added, crossing his arms. "Do you want me to log out of the monitoring software or actually power down the system?" I asked, deliberately slow. He rolled his eyes. "Don't play games. Full shutdown. Now." I could have asked why. Could have reminded him the COO had been checking in daily on this project. But years of working under Tom had taught me that reasoning with him was like trying to teach a brick to swim. So I just nodded, turned back to my screen, and began the shutdown sequence. The secure console flickered through its warnings, disconnecting livestream, terminating processes, severing data feed. Each confirmation prompt felt heavier than the last. It took less than 60 seconds to pull the plug on months of careful setup. The screen went black. The terminal fan wound down to silence. It was done. I logged the action in the system audit. Client feed terminated, per manager instruction. No flourish, no commentary. Just a fact that would stay there forever. "Leave your badge on the desk," Tom said. I took it off my lanyard and set it down. "Am I coming back?" I asked. He smirked. "We'll see. Take the rest of the day. I'll handle things from here." He didn't wait for me to pack my bag, just turned and strode off toward the elevator. I watched him go, my mind already turning over the decision he'd just made. Tom had never liked that I was the only one trusted with the live feed terminal. I'd built the system from scratch when the client signed with us, a secure connection no one else in the department knew how to maintain. I documented everything, of course, but the COO had insisted the live feed remain in my control for security reasons. Tom called it territorial. I called it keeping a $2 million contract from collapsing. He didn't understand the stakes. Or maybe he didn't care. I took my time gathering my things. My phone buzzed with a couple of Slack pings, random chatter about lunch plans. Out of habit, I checked the feed status on my personal device, even though I already knew what I'd see. Offline. Completely dark. Tom wouldn't notice the difference immediately. He'd head to lunch, probably brag to someone about finally taking control of the feed. But I knew exactly what would happen next. The client had a major product launch in 2 hours. Their marketing campaign was synchronized with the live feed, their distributors standing by for green light signals only the system could send. Every minute offline was a minute closer to chaos. I walked past the reception desk, keeping my pace steady. "Heading out early?" the receptionist asked. "Something like that," I said with a small smile. The elevator doors closed behind me, and for a brief moment, I considered going home and letting the chips fall where they may. But the truth was, I wanted to see it. I wanted to be there when Tom's decision detonated in real time. So instead of heading for the street, I went down one floor to the small cafe that overlooked the lobby. Ordered a coffee. Sat by the window with a perfect view of our office entrance. 25 minutes later, Tom returned from lunch. His tie was loose, his phone in one hand, coffee in the other. He looked relaxed, like a man who thought he'd just made a big power move. He didn't see them at first. The client rep in her tailored navy suit, the COO standing beside her, both faces tight with urgency. They were waiting for him, right in front of the reception desk. I couldn't hear their words from the cafe, but I didn't need to. I saw the COO lean in, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. Their product launch is in 2 hours. Why is the system offline? Tom froze mid-step. The coffee in his hand wobbled, and I just sat there, sipping mine, knowing this was only the first crack in what was about to be a very public collapse. From my spot in the cafe, I watched Tom's expression shift. It started with confusion, his head tilting slightly, brows drawn together. Then the first flicker of realization. The COO wasn't just stopping by for a friendly chat. The client rep leaned in, her gestures sharp, clipped. Her phone was in her hand, the screen angled toward him like proof in a courtroom. I could almost imagine the headline scrolling across her mind. Critical system offline. Launch in jeopardy. Tom's mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear. He held his hands out in that half-open way he used when he wanted to look cooperative, but was really just stalling. The COO's reply was short. His posture stiff, chin down, eyes locked on Tom's face like he was reading a confession. Then he turned toward the elevators. Tom hesitated, then followed, still trying to talk, the client rep trailing behind them. I didn't have to guess where they were going. The server room was on the same floor as my old desk. I stirred my coffee slowly, letting the steam curl into the air. It wasn't gloating. Not yet. Just watching a situation unfold exactly the way I knew it would. By the time I went back upstairs, the energy in the office had shifted. You can feel it when something's wrong. Conversations drop to a murmur. People glance toward closed doors. The air feels thinner somehow. 2 of the junior analysts were huddled near the printer, speaking in low voices. One of them spotted me and straightened. "Hey, I thought you left," she said. "I grabbed a coffee," I replied, keeping my tone even. "What's going on?" They exchanged a look. "The feed's down," the other one whispered. "The client's here. Tom's in the server room with the COO, and they don't look happy." I gave a small, sympathetic nod, the kind you give when you're pretending to be surprised. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I caught sight of Tom pacing, hands on his hips. The COO stood by the table, phone to his ear, his free hand tapping against his leg in a steady, impatient rhythm. The client rep sat stiffly, arms crossed, gaze fixed on Tom like she was trying to bore a hole through him. It would be easy to think I wanted this, seeing him flounder, watching his smugness chip away in real time. But it was more complicated than that. For months, I'd been warning him that the live feed was fragile in the lead-up to the launch. Not because the system was unstable, it wasn't, but because it relied on specific security protocols. The terminal was configured with encryption keys that couldn't just be copied and pasted somewhere else. Disconnected improperly, and the client's servers would reject any attempt to reconnect. I'd sent him the documentation. Twice. He'd skimmed the first page and tossed it aside. "This stuff's too complicated," he'd said once, laughing. "You IT people love to make it sound harder than it is." Except it wasn't too complicated. It was exactly as complicated as it needed to be to keep a $2 million contract safe from careless hands. The conference room door opened and the COO stepped out, his expression unreadable. He walked straight past my desk without a glance, heading toward the CEO's office. That was bad. Really bad. Tom came out a few seconds later. His face was flushed, collar slightly askew like he'd been arguing and losing. He spotted me. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "Finishing my coffee," I said, motioning toward the paper cup on my desk. "You were told to leave." "And I was told to shut down the terminal," I said, my voice neutral. "I did exactly what you asked." His jaw tightened. "You could have warned me." I blinked at him, keeping my tone level. "Tom, I confirmed the order twice. You didn't want explanations, remember?" He didn't answer, just turned and stalked back toward his office. By mid-afternoon, the whispers had spread. People were checking their phones, probably reading client emails or internal messages about the launch delay. The junior analysts were pulling up older backups, trying to find a workaround, but I knew it wouldn't work. The system wasn't designed to be patched together in an emergency. That was the point. We'd built it with strict security in mind. Any deviation, and it shut down rather than risk data corruption or leaks. And here's the thing about high-profile launches. They're like domino lines. One piece falls, and everything else follows. Marketing campaigns stall. Distribution freezes. Contracts start bleeding penalty clauses. I kept my head down, answering a few unrelated emails, acting like I wasn't listening when snippets of the unfolding disaster drifted over the cubicle walls. Around 4 p.m., I saw the client rep leave. She didn't shake Tom's hand. She didn't even look at him. The COO escorted her to the lobby, his posture rigid. Tom stayed in his office, blinds drawn. I sat there, letting the weight of the day settle in. I hadn't engineered any of this. I hadn't pulled a stunt or sabotaged anything. I'd simply followed an order to the letter, and now the consequences were piling up in a neat, unavoidable stack on Tom's desk. The thing about moments like this is, they reveal something important. Not just about the people involved, but about the environment you're in. A good leader takes responsibility. A bad one looks for someone to blame. And I had a sinking feeling that tomorrow Tom would try to make this my fault, which meant I'd need to be ready. I didn't expect to sleep much that night, and I didn't. My mind kept replaying the moment in the cafe, the COO's face tightening as he spoke, Tom's coffee hand wobbling, and then fast-forwarding to what I knew was coming next. Corporate disasters don't stay quiet for long. By morning, emails would be flying, calls would be made, and somewhere along the line, Tom would realize that the easiest way to save himself was to point the finger at me. When I walked into the office the next day, the shift in atmosphere was impossible to miss. People weren't making eye contact. Conversations stopped when I got close. On my desk, a single printed sheet of paper waited. Meeting at 9 a.m., Conference Room B. Attendees, Tom H., Anna M., HR, COO. No subject line, no explanation, which told me everything. At 8:59, I walked into the conference room. HR was already there, her notebook open, pen poised. The COO sat at the far end of the table, phone face down in front of him, expression like granite. Tom was leaning back in his chair, one arm draped casually over the backrest, the other holding a pen he kept tapping against the table, trying to look relaxed. "Anna," he said, giving me a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Let's go over what happened yesterday." I sat down, placing my notebook on the table. "Of course." Tom leaned forward. The live feed went down right before a major client launch. This caused significant disruption and reputational damage. Now, as I understand it, you were the last person to operate the terminal before it went offline. The COO's gaze stayed on me, unreadable. HR's pen hovered over the page. "That's correct," I said evenly. I shut it down per Tom's direct instruction at approximately 11:04 a.m. yesterday. The action was logged in the system audit. Tom shifted in his chair. "You could have told me it was linked to the client's feed. Instead, you just did it." I met his eyes. "Tom, I confirmed the order twice. The second time, I asked if you wanted me to delete the connection. You said yes. You didn't ask for an explanation, and you've told me in the past to avoid overcomplicating things." The COO's head tilted slightly. "Did you know the shutdown would sever the client's launch feed?" "Yes," I said. "And I also knew it couldn't be reconnected without reauthentication, which requires compliance approval. That's why I asked for confirmation twice." Tom laughed lightly, shaking his head. "She's framing it like I just signed off on tanking the launch. That's not what happened." I didn't look away. The audit log contains the exact text. Client feed terminated, per manager instruction. Time-stamped. Immutable. The COO turned toward Tom. "Is that accurate?" Tom hesitated. "It may be how it appears, but I didn't know what I was authorizing." "And yet you authorized it," the COO said, his tone still flat. HR scribbled something down without looking up. The meeting wrapped after 30 more minutes of circling the same drain. Tom insisting he wasn't told. Me repeating that I confirmed twice. The COO asking variations of the same question. Why did you give the order at all? When we left, Tom brushed past me in the hallway. You're enjoying this, aren't you? He muttered under his breath. I stopped walking. Enjoying watching the company lose a $2 million contract? No, Tom, but I am enjoying finally having something in writing. He froze for just a second before continuing down the hall. By lunch, word had spread even further. I could feel eyes on me in the break room, hear the low hum of speculation in the corridors. People love a scandal, especially when it's internal. I kept my head down and worked. There were still other clients to manage, other projects to run. The COO's office door stayed shut most of the afternoon, and Tom's blinds were drawn again. Around 3 p.m., an email from HR landed in my inbox. Please prepare any documentation, correspondence, or notes relevant to the events of yesterday. Forward directly to me before 10 a.m. tomorrow. That was the moment I knew Tom's situation was worse than he realized. HR doesn't put things like that in writing unless they're building a case, and I had plenty to give them. Back at my desk, I opened a folder on my personal drive. Every email where Tom dismissed my concerns. Every meeting note where he'd waved away security protocols. Screenshots of Slack messages where he'd bragged about streamlining by cutting corners. All time-stamped, all archived. I didn't need to manipulate anything. The truth was enough. By the time I shut down for the day, I had a neat, ordered file ready to send. A factual, clinical record of how we'd gotten here. Tom thought yesterday had been the crisis. He hadn't realized yet. It was just the first crack. I woke before my alarm, the gray light of an overcast morning cutting a thin line across my bedroom wall. My phone was face down on the nightstand, but I didn't need to check it to know what would be waiting. Emails, pings, calendar holds that looked innocuous at a glance and felt like subpoenas when you opened them. I got to the office 10 minutes early. The building's lobby smelled faintly of bleach and overbrewed coffee. Upstairs, the floor was too quiet. That particular don't make noise around a wounded animal, quiet. At 8:07 a.m., the COO sent a calendar invite. 9:30, emergency, client status, and next steps. Attendees, CEO, COO, HR, legal, IT lead, Anna, Tom, legal. That told me the temperature. At 8:22, HR replied to my document submission with a one-line email. Received. Thank you for the thoroughness. No emojis, no softening adjectives, just acknowledgement. Clinical, like a gloved hand placing a file on a steel table. I made tea I didn't want and stared at the steam until it disappeared. My screensaver reflected me back. Blouse crisp, hair neat, eyes steady. You wouldn't have known my heart was doing that controlled drummer's roll it does before fire drills and presentations. At 9:27, I walked into the big conference room. The blinds were half open, winter light flattening everything to the same paper color. The CEO stood at the head of the table with a printout in his hand. The COO sat to his right, jaw set. HR had lined up 3 pens next to her legal pad like scalpels. Our IT lead, Marcus, was already plugged into the projector. Tom took the seat far end, like he could put distance between himself and the screen. The CEO didn't bother with greetings. The client's counsel formally notified us at 8:51 that they're invoking the penalty clause for launch disruption. He said, they're also reserving the right to terminate for cause. He looked around the table. $2 million in annual revenue, at risk, plus penalties. A stillness moved through the room. Not shock. Recognition. The COO nodded at Marcus. Show the sequence. Marcus brought up the audit trail. He scrolled past routine entries, timestamps ticking like metronome clicks. Then the line sat there in 14-point font, simple as a kitchen knife. 11:04:17. Client live feed terminated, per manager instruction. The CEO didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Explain why that instruction was given. All eyes slid to Tom. He cleared his throat and tried on a reasonable smile. We were consolidating control of key systems. The terminal was owned by one employee. That's not scalable. It was the only terminal authenticated to the client's live feed. The COO said, flat. The re-authentication window is measured in days, not hours, by design. Removing it inside launch week is not consolidation. It's negligence. Tom's chin lifted a fraction. I was not informed that shutting down the machine would sever the live feed. If I had been warned, I kept my voice even. Yesterday at 11:02, I asked if you wanted a full shutdown or just a session logout. You said full shutdown now. I asked again if you wanted me to terminate the live connection. You said, don't play games. Marcus clicked to the cross-reference. My terminal log, Slack timestamps, Tom's calendar entry labeled Ops Cleanup. The timings nested together like puzzle pieces. No drama, just alignment. Legal spoke for the first time, glasses low on her nose. Ms. M, did you make any discretionary decisions beyond the instruction? No, I said. I executed the command I was given and documented it. Did you withhold information that would have prevented the instruction? I asked for confirmation twice, I said. Mr. H has repeatedly directed me not to overcomplicate explanations. I kept my language simple. I also sent him the security protocol summary last week. I slid a printed copy forward. This one. HR took it without looking up. The COO didn't move. He just watched Tom. Tom leaned toward the table, palms up, voice warmer now, like we were old friends who'd had a small misunderstanding. Look, the core issue is single-point failure. We can fix that by distributing access. After the fact, the COO said, yesterday you removed the only authenticated point during a critical window. The CEO set his printout down. We're not debating architecture. We're dealing with consequences. We have a client threatening termination, penalties accruing, and a system that cannot reconnect without a compliance cycle. He turned to me. How long to restore if we prioritize? I didn't answer right away. I pictured the steps, the signatures, the two-step with the client's security officer, the test packets, the validation hash. If the client cooperates immediately, best case 48 hours. Realistically, 72. There are external approvals we don't control. The CEO's jaw tightened in quiet calculation. Tom tried to wedge himself back in. Anna can accelerate it. She's done it before. I met the CEO's eyes. I can coordinate and execute, but it requires the process we agreed with the client. No shortcuts, no side doors. The room held its breath for a beat. That wasn't a threat. It was the truth. Process exists to protect people from exactly this. The CEO nodded once. Understood. He turned to HR. We will address accountability separately. Right now, we need to limit damage. HR wrote a neat line. It looked like a verdict even before it was one. The meeting broke into tasking. Marcus would prep the staging environment. Legal would triage the penalty language. The COO would call the client's COO and keep him on the line until our first handshake passed. Tom remained seated, staring at the table like it might offer him a new version of events if he just looked hard enough. When the room thinned, he followed me into the hallway. The door clicked shut behind us. The carpet swallowed our steps. Help me out here, he said softly. You know I didn't mean to crater the launch. Say I misunderstood you. Say anything that takes the edge off. I kept my voice calm. Tom, I'm not your edge. I let that sit. What I am is the person who told you for 3 months that these controls weren't optional. You called it territorial. You called it gatekeeping. He swallowed, color high in his face. Your tone doesn't help you, you know. My tone didn't shut down the feed. He leaned closer, voice dropping. If you hang me out to dry, you'll look vindictive. You'll get a reputation here. I blinked once. I have a reputation here. I do my job, I document, and I make sure people get paid and systems stay up. I'm not changing that today. He stared at me a second longer, then gave a tight, practiced smile that never reached his eyes. Careful, he said, and walked away. Careful. The word echoed like a thrown coin hitting tile. At 11:15, the COO asked me to join a call in his office with the client team. Their security officer sounded tired but professional. We stepped through the recovery plan line by line. I could hear keyboards in the background on their end, the muffled click of a door, a low voice asking for an ETA. We'll prioritize approvals, their officer said, but we're documenting root cause. Send your internal audit and the instruction chain. The COO glanced at me. I nodded. You'll have everything within the hour, he said. We ended the call with timelines no one liked but everyone could live with. The COO exhaled once, long. Thank you, he said to me. Not warm, not cold, just real. Back at my desk, I packaged the logs, the Slack confirmations, the security summary I'd sent last week, the change control calendar. Facts lined up in a row, each one small, together a wall. At 12:42, the CEO's assistant put a 30-minute block on my calendar. 3 p.m. Follow-up and accountability. Tom was on the invite, HR too. I saved my work and looked out across the office. Phones rang. Printers hummed. A laugh surfaced and died quickly. From Tom's office, the blinds were open again. He was on the phone, gesturing with a pen, his smile visible even through glass. Spin in progress. I thought about the message buried under the mess. Systems don't fail because someone followed a process. They fail when someone in a hurry decides the rules are optional. Leadership isn't about knowing every line of code or every clause in a contract. It's about knowing when to listen and when to ask the second question before you give the first order. I sent the audit bundle to legal, CC'd HR and the COO. Then I stood to refill my tea. The kettle hissed softly. Steam rose and vanished. In the glass of the break room, my reflection looked like it had slept. At 2:59, I was outside the conference room door. I could hear voices. Low, contained. The way people talk when they're arranging heavy furniture and don't want to scratch the floor. I opened the door. Tom was already seated, back very straight, hands folded on the table like a student hoping posture might count for extra credit. HR had 2 folders this time. The CEO looked up. We're going to set the record, he said. And for the first time since yesterday, I felt the ground steady under my feet. Not because the outcome would be easy, because the truth was finally the only version left in the room. The door clicked shut behind me, and for a second all I could hear was the HVAC hum. Steady, indifferent, the sound buildings make when they don't care who keeps their lights on. The CEO nodded to the chair across from him. Anna. His voice was level. Thanks for joining. HR slid one of the 2 folders toward the center of the table, the tab marked with a small piece of red tape. Tom stared at it like it might detonate. We're going to set the record, the CEO said, hands folded. I want this simple. He looked at me first. You shut down the live feed terminal yesterday at 11:04 a.m., correct? Yes. I kept my tone neutral. Per Tom's direct instruction. I confirmed twice. The action and the confirmation are in the logs I sent to legal at 12:42 today. HR flipped open the folder to a printed copy of the audit trail. My words sat on the page like a held breath. The CEO turned to Tom. Did you give that instruction? Tom inhaled, shoulders lifting. I gave an instruction to clean up. I believed we were logging out of a session. I was not informed that the system design would... Did you give the instruction? The CEO repeated. To shut down the workstation? Tom's eyes flicked to HR, then back. Yes. A beat. No one moved. The building hummed. We'll let legal finish their interviews, the CEO said. But based on the chain of documentation, the external impact, and the client's current posture, We're placing you on paid administrative leave, effective immediately pending the outcome. Tom blinked twice, slow, like a reboot that wouldn't take. Leave? We need continuity. I should be part of the remediation. The remediation is proceeding, the COO said, voice calm enough to cut. You won't be part of it. HR closed the folder. Your network access will be suspended at 3:30. Please remain available for further questions. Security will accompany you to collect personal items. Tom's mouth opened, then closed. He gave a small, practiced smile that looked cracked at the edges. This is political, he said, not to anyone in particular. You're making me the headline so the client has a villain. The CEO didn't flinch. We're acknowledging a decision and containing a problem. He glanced at me. The recovery plan? I opened my notebook. The steps were already in neat lines, each with a checkbox, each with a name. Staging handshake passed at 2:26. We'll receive the client's reauth token by 4:15 if their security officer hits her window. Our validation hash is ready on our side. If all goes clean, we can move to controlled reconnect at 5:30, monitoring for 2 hours before we widen scope. Best case then? The COO asked. We'll get status pings green for a subset today. Full throughput tomorrow after the second approval. Marketing will need to reschedule the public push. Ops can resume quietly tonight. No one cheered. Real life doesn't do triumphant music cues. It just assigns tasks. Do what you need, the CEO said. Then to HR. Coordinate with security. Tom's chair squeaked as he stood. He didn't look at me when he left. He looked past me like air would be kinder than a face. The door shut. The silence felt less dense. The COO turned to me. You'll lead the restore. You'll also propose a revised access model that prevents single-point operator and single-point manager failure. He let that hang for a moment. We'll fund it. That last sentence was the closest thing to an apology I was going to get from the building. I nodded. I'll send the draft by end of week. The CEO gathered his papers. There's one more item, he said, eyes on me. We're offering a retention bonus for carrying the recovery and a title adjustment. Interim director, systems reliability. Effective today if you want it. It's interim because you shouldn't be punished by a process that takes HR 6 weeks. I watched my pen roll a half inch and stop. Interim. Reliable. Words that fit like solid shoes. I wasn't naive. Titles don't erase what happened yesterday. But they do change who gets to say no next time. I'll accept, I said. He nodded once. Good. They left me there with the table and the hum and the folder with the red tab. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. The building had already decided what it would say. At 3:28, I returned to my desk. Security arrived 2 minutes later, quiet, professional. They stopped at Tom's door. A few heads lifted, then dropped, the way people look at a solar eclipse through their fingers. I opened the secure console. The staging link waited, patient and blinking. The client's token came through at 4:11, 4 minutes early. I messaged Marcus, then dialed into the bridge. Voices checked in, one after another, clipped and businesslike. Ops ready. Security ready. Client monitoring ready. Systems ready. We ran the sequence aloud, like pilots at a cockpit, not because we didn't know it, but because saying it out loud makes people careful. At 5:34, the first green indicators returned. At 5:41, a second cluster lit up. At 6:02, the client's security officer said, "We're seeing stable flow on our end." She didn't sound relieved exactly. She sounded like someone who'd slipped out of a rip current and was treading water parallel to shore. Hold at current scope, I said. We'll widen at 7 if the logs stay clean. The COO unmuted just long enough to say, "Thank you." Then he went quiet again, listening. Leaders who know what they don't know are easy to follow. At 7:06, we widened. Nothing spiked. Nothing sagged. The lights kept stacking green, and the room around me, still half full of people who had stayed because they understood that payroll and launches are synonyms for rent and pride, started breathing like a body again. At 8:12, we ended the call. No speech, no victory lap, just a list of follow-ups and a second bridge scheduled for 7 a.m. I shut my laptop and sat back. Across the aisle, someone exhaled and laughed once, the kind that releases exactly the air it needs to and no more. The office smelled like stale coffee and warm plastic. The janitor's cart squeaked in the hall. On my way out, I passed the glass wall of the conference room. The chair Tom had used was still slightly pushed back, like it remembered he'd tried to make himself bigger in it. Security had been discreet. There was no parade. He would go home and call someone and say words like context and miscommunication and no one told me. Maybe he would believe them. Maybe he wouldn't. Outside, the night air had that iron taste it gets before rain. I stood on the curb a moment, phone in my pocket, city noise folding and unfolding around me. My reflection in the window looked like a person who had done their job. That's the message, I thought. And it wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about the quiet math of responsibility. Systems don't care who's liked. They care who's careful. People get paid or they don't. Launches happen or they don't. You can manage by posture or you can manage by process, but only one of those survives contact with the real world. The next morning, the client's COO sent a 2-line email. Appreciate the speed and clarity. We'll suspend termination while we review. Continue with the revised access plan. No praise. No absolution. Just oxygen. I forwarded it to the team. Then I opened a new document and titled it Access and Accountability Model V1. I started writing the section headings I'd had in my head for weeks, long before yesterday tried to make a point with a sledgehammer. At 9:03, an unfamiliar name pinged my inbox. An HR business partner from another division. Congrats on the interim role. When you come up for air, I'd like to talk about cross-training your approach to our other teams. I smiled, just enough to feel it. The building hummed. The green lights held. And for the first time in days, the rhythm in my chest matched the steady blink of a system doing exactly what it was designed to do. Protect the people on the other end of the numbers.